In this video, we're talking about sports. I love sports. I love watching the NBA. But have you noticed how sports leagues have actually struggled in the past few years? And there's a wide difference between how the NBA performs versus the NFL versus other sports leagues. So in this video, I want to talk a little bit about why they have struggled and what are some of the keys to running a successful sports league. And of course, the lessons we apply here to such specific content, such a specific industry, can then be extrapolated and applied to your company. Let's jump right in. Hi there, my name is Ruben and I'm a data and decision-making expert, and I help companies turn their mountain of data into valuable insights and better decisions. So sports leagues. Sports did okay during the pandemic. There was, of course, no attendance in some sports. The NBA did a bubble in Orlando. So they were all trying different things to deal with COVID. But the struggles that sports leagues had during the pandemic, they're actually not completely new. They've actually been struggling for years. And there's been a consistent decline in some of the key metrics that sports leagues look at. So the pandemic isn't really a valid reason for why perhaps revenues were down, sponsorship was up. It was definitely something that drove or limited the leagues. But let's look at a few things in terms of performance. Let's start with the NFL. So generally, maybe perhaps one of the better leagues, and I think they do a lot of things really well. They have their struggles. The 2021 draft was the most watched of all time, but the Super Bowl also had some of the lowest viewers of all time. So good and bad for the NFL. MLB baseball generally has a lot of issues. They've been dealing with the sticky substance issues for pitchers. There's less people watching baseball, especially less younger people. And the World Series viewership in 2020 was some of the lowest in 20 years. So baseball, I think, is just struggling all around. Then we have the NBA, which is what I watch. They did their bubble, which I actually thought worked out quite well for them. The 2021 finals weren't really as watched as I think something like 2015, when LeBron James was in the finals against the Warriors, but they had some glimpses of hope. Nonetheless, their viewership is down in the playoffs and in the finals, and of course in the regular season as a whole. So if you think about the sports leagues in two dimensions, strategy and operations, how good is their strategy and how good are they at executing that strategy? And we have a little quadrant. I'll put a little image here for you. I think the NBA has a good strategy and has overall good operations. It doesn't mean they're killing it. I think they're clearly dealing with viewership issues and making sure people can watch the games, but they also really embrace things like NFTs, player empowerment, and things like that. I would say the NBA is doing a good job of positioning themselves towards the future and then moving towards the future, even if the short term is not as strong. I would say the NFL has a poor strategy, but really good operations. So clearly they do really well with their Super Bowl, with their games, with the promotion of the sport itself. But I think the overall strategy for the NFL is much weaker. They did very little to address some of the racial issues that came up over the past couple of years for all sports leagues. They kind of just ignored it, so to speak. They, of course, have some of those concerns around head injuries, which may not be a big deal for the current league. People are not leaving the league because of it. But we are seeing some concerns from the younger youth leagues from moms. And if you think about it, if moms start to feel concerned about their kids playing football because of head injuries, they might not put them in the sport early on, which then 10 to 15 years later becomes a real issue. And then for the MLB, I would put that as very poor operations, very poor strategy. I'm really not sure what the baseball is trying to do here. They just don't seem to really have a strategy that makes sense for the future. And their operations, their day-to-day also doesn't seem to be very good. They had COVID. I thought they dealt with it somewhat okay. So it's not quite clear where baseball is trying to go and really what's going to make baseball much more interesting in the future. So you can apply this idea, this strategy versus operations concept, a 2x2 matrix, and understand, are you really good at strategy but poor operations? Good operations, poor strategy. And of course, you can do this by specific divisions, marketing, sales, and so on. Now, there's a few things that sports leagues do well, and I think they'd all be remiss if they didn't pick this up. Now, specifically the NFL, I think the NFL does a really good job in the operations for day-to-day. So they have done, I think, a structure for the game that makes sense that I wish the NBA and the MLB would take on. First, the NFL has done a fantastic job of capturing days of the week, Monday Night Football and Sunday Football and things like that. That's an amazing achievement to be able to take on a specific day of the week and attach it to the sport. Now, they have done this with really good marketing, really good consistency. The NBA doesn't really have something like this. I'm not aware of the MLB having similar things, but being able to capture days of the week is fantastic. So this is, I think, top-notch marketing chops top-notch operations from the NFL. Number 2 is quality over quantity. The NFL only has about 17 games. NBA has about 82. They had a little bit less this past season. And MLB has about 162. So this is a lot of content, a lot of games being played out. And what happens, and I can speak from the NBA specific here, is you end up with games that don't really matter, where the main stars don't play because they need rest, but the game itself doesn't matter. That is, they could lose the game, they could win it, who cares? And now you end up with what's effectively a bunch of guys throwing the ball in the gym. Versus in the NFL, every game does matter. So I think this is another thing the NFL does really well, and that the NBA and the MLB should really be thinking about. How to reduce the number of games, but make the games much more interesting, much more important, and that will align with what the players want, which is more rest, and be able to go much stronger. Think about the MLB, 162 games, it's a lot. Third, big shows, right? The NFL has a Super Bowl. It's a fantastic show. The NBA doesn't really have something like that. The World Series doesn't have a show that goes along with it. This ability to merge the sport with entertainment, I think is really strong, really fantastic. And number 4 is parity. Now, parity in the league really varies from sport to sport. In the NBA, you can have a single player make a lot of impact on the sport. In the NFL, less so. MLB, less so. When it comes to parity, I actually think another sports league does this really well, which we didn't talk about, which is NHL. I think hockey does a really good job at making different teams reach the playoffs, get different teams to win the Stanley Cup. The NBA is sort of dominated by a couple teams every year, mostly LeBron James. The NFL had that dominance from Tom Brady, but there's also different teams that got to play. So parity and trying to impose more parity in the league through different things, limitations, tax fines, tax limits, caps, all that kind of stuff. I think that really helps to make the sport much more interesting. And if you look at, for example, college March Madness, right? The NBA tournament, people love that because it's really up in the air. You never know who's going to win, who's going to do really well. So I think if the NBA, MLB, and of course even the NFL keep bringing more parity, they will be doing even much better. And that's all I have for today. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, anything else you can do on YouTube. In the description box below, you're going to find a few links that I think you'll enjoy. First is the link to my first book, The Data Mirage. The book is out now. You can buy it wherever you buy your books, Amazon, Chapters, Barnes & Nobles, Kindle. The second link is my weekly newsletter, The Growth Needle. I share similar ideas, but in a written format. And third is Twitter, posting similar ideas as well, but in a much shorter format, a tweet. So I think you'll find those links helpful. Finally, in the comment section below, leave me a comment, question, your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. Until next time, talk soon.